Hello and welcome back to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video, our fundamental focus is on exactly what we mean when we say structure. Analysing structure in a text seems quite weird. I think that's because we associate structure with the building blocks of, well, buildings and things that we can more concretely see and observe. And when we're critiquing the structure of a text, we're looking more predominantly at the ways a writer has intentionally chose to lay their work out to create a reaction for us as readers. They've got an aim in mind, a purpose. They've sought to introduce us to various different ideas and draw attention to exactly what they want us to see through the structure. So structure, in essence, is the guide to how we see things. This video is designed to give you a few clues and questions to guide your thinking whenever you're looking at a new text. And it's a starter. There are definitely other things I can build for you regarding how you can structure an answer on structure. But for now, this is your way in to understand exactly what we could mean when we look at structure in a text. Perspective is a fine place to start when unpicking the structure of a text. Because broadly speaking, we see it through the lens of whoever is telling the story, the narrator. So the first thing to ask is, who is telling the story? And if you can unfold it, what is their mood? There are three types of narrative voice. The first person is I. For example, I saw the fire. The first person is vulnerable. They're relaying their personal experience through their narrative. And often we can expect for them not to be totally accurate in the facts because they're seeing it completely through their opinion. Second person is unusual for a piece of prose, but very common in poetry and in song. You saw the fire. Now that's quite empowering upon the reader because we are in control, hence why it's not used so much in prose. And third person narration. There's an emotional detachment here when we say he saw the fire, or she saw the fire, or it saw the fire. The third person narrator seems all powerful at points. They see more than the characters do. But it's not simply narrator who has control here. What about the setting itself? And here you shouldn't just be thinking about the location or the locations. You should also be considering the atmosphere that's created in the description around those settings that are used in the particular extract or text you're looking at. Does the action even happen in the setting that you're in, or has it happened in another place? If so, the perspective of location and setting seems incredibly powerful to guiding our thinking. Another key principle when thinking of perspective is that of time. And to keep it simple, time really is as simple as what tense is it written in? Is it concentrating on the past, in which case I saw it? Is it moving to the present? I see it. If so, the action's ongoing. And does it even do something radical like move to the future, like I will see it? In which case, the broad question with perspective and time is the action ongoing? And if not, why not? The final and most prominent feature of perspective is that of character. You want to be able to answer the question, which is the main character the same as the narrator? How are they even described in terms of their looks, in terms of their actions, in terms of their mood? But also, do they share their thoughts through dialogue? If so, what is said in what they say in their speech? Does it reflect how the narrator describes them if the narrator isn't them? A huge amount to take in there with perspective, but without perspective, we can't move on. Next up is focus, and that is the way an idea is developed by the writer and what ways they choose to do that through the structure of their writing. Now, the most famous narrative arc is that of Gustav Freytag, who believed there were 7 steps to great writing. Now, it wasn't just him who came up with this, but he noticed that great stories had these 7 elements. That's, you start with the background information, there's a problem, you reach a climax, then after that climax we move to a resolution that ends off perfectly. But we need to be asking ourselves, as we focus on what writers have focused on, how is the writer choosing to show me new information? And there are two major ways we can do that. I want to start with you by looking at the way the order of events plays out. Because we've got a choice. We can choose to tell a story in order, in chronological order, from start to finish. Or we might choose to prioritise it, starting with the middle of an event, right into the action. Or, concentrate towards the end. But what is the focus of the opening of the extract or the text you're looking at? Do you find that there's a resolution at the end? The other broad question we need to ask with the order of events is, what information are you told and shared, and what stuff is not told to you at all? By withholding information, the writer has intentionally chosen not to focus your attention on something, and might already be forcing you to imply and infer all sorts of other messages that could be in operation in the text. So the other job you have when thinking of a writer's focus is by looking at emerging patterns. You're analytically concentrating on structure. So you're trying to work out what is implied from whatever you've seen. A semantic field is a great place to start because it's offering you a collection of words that have a shared meaning, and that pattern across the writing can prove that it's a priority to the writer or to the meaning behind the text. But equally, repetition serves a similar function of emphasising a particular idea. Now you might say, well, that's not structural, that's language. But when we're looking at a text, sometimes language is structural too. If the repetition is so pertinent and so symbolic, we call it a motif because it's a repeated, recurring symbol that's powerful. Now, hopefully these two things together, the order of events and the patterns, will help inform your view of what you think might happen next. Because the writer has prioritised this. They've drawn their attention for you to be fixated on this text, hopefully to the extent that you want to know what happens next. But in essence, when trying to work out how to prioritise a writer's focus, you need to make sure that you've, in the margin for each paragraph, summarised in just one word why the writer has done this. Is it about character in this paragraph? Is it about setting? Just make it one word so that when you go back and analyse the actual whole text, you know exactly what each paragraph was broadly focusing on. Now we know what we've prioritised as readers, we need to think about how it changes across the piece of writing as a whole. And the first way of looking at that is how the pace itself changes. So how does change work across the writing? And how was it altered by how quickly things are happening? We look at sentence type and paragraph briefly in this video, but elsewhere in the description I have other videos that talk about this in more depth. But a slow pace builds tension and maybe creates a sense of dry dullness for the reader. But fast pace, well, that's creating action, it's showing that it's intense movement. Your big question should be about how the pace informs what is happening. Does it impact your view of the event that's happening? The other thing that helps inform pace is that of time again. You might be considering flashbacks. It's also technically called analepsis. And that's where you create nostalgia. You're going back in time, maybe. You might be slowing the pace down, pushing a certain emotion for us as a reader that's either experienced by a character or taking us back to a pivotal moment in their existence. But equally, time references don't just go back, they can go forward, hence the flash forward, called the prolepsis. It's heightening the contrast potentially between what the character's currently going through and what will happen to them. It might show the consequence of something they're currently going through that you've seen in the narrative, the end product, if you like. But it also grips us to work out how the situation we've just read about has informed what they then face. It's a great way of bringing together two very distant ideas. The big thing about any shift that you experience in the writing is that it should in some way inform your view of whatever the priority was in the writing. Does your view on a character or setting change since the start of what you read? If so, I would argue that pace has got something to do with it. Maybe the action itself has something to do with it, but goes so deeply that you can spot that. Finally, there are some really basic ways into understanding structure in a text, and they're so visual. That's that of the paragraph length, whether there's headings or subheadings, whether there's a use of questions, bullet points. All of these things are indicators as to what the writer wants you to either focus on or concentrate on as it shifts. But then when we go on to a more granular level, sentence type is a very clear indicator also of what the structure is showing you. For example, a minor sentence is very direct with one word, often showing high impact of its power because it's either emotive or associated with other connotations. A simple sentence has pure action. Compound is giving you a bit of detail and linking two ideas. And a complex sentence, well, it's detail and development of those ideas. Now, I'm not going to rush through and assume that that's all you need to nail it at any level, but I have other videos that go into more depth about each of these sentence types, as I do also with paragraph length. But the broad questions you should ask yourself are, well, how does paragraph length affect the development of the text? When it's a really short sentence standing on its own, that it's its own paragraph, how does that do something for you as the reader? But then when you go to the sentence level, how does the sentence type affect the fluency of the text? Does it affect the pacing of what you've read? The big question is, how does the writer guide us as readers through their text? Do they choose to summarise the same key points over again? And are they echoing the mood of their writing through how their text is laid out? There's no denying that at any level, structuring a piece of text, both as the writer and as the reader, critiquing someone else's writing, is not easy. However, the hallmarks of a great analytical student is that they can break it down in terms of who's telling the story, what that story concentrates on, how that story changes, and how the physical layout of that text backs up what is happening. When you've nailed that, the rest is breezy. Best of luck in all you do. Why not subscribe to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar for all things English, literary and grammatical?